Good evening, and thank you all for attending the 2025 State of the City Address. I'm Councilman Mac Driscoll, and I'm honored to have been asked to open tonight's event by our Mayor, Wade Kapszukiewicz. I'm proud to report that the state of our great city is strong, and improvements are being made every day. Over the last few years, Toledo has made historic investments in infrastructure, economic development, and neighborhood revitalization. We continue to punch above our weight, proving time and time again that we can compete for major federal funding and attracting new investment. But we also know that work is far from over. There are still too many neighborhoods struggling from generations of disinvestment, and too many families struggling with barriers to opportunity. As an urban planner, envisioning the Toledo of tomorrow is what makes me excited about our future. A Toledo where every neighborhood has safe streets, vibrant parks, and thriving small businesses. We must continue to grow our economy so each resident has access to a good-paying job and the training necessary to build a successful and meaningful career. We must support small business growth. By cutting red tape and working to attract new investment, we can ensure a policy and a posture that supports new business creation, more housing, and job growth through economic development. Our neighborhoods also stand to gain from planning for environmental sustainability. Our city must take bold steps to address climate change by investing in green infrastructure and walkable, bike-friendly streets. A week from today, my wife Katie and I will welcome our first child. We are, of course, tremendously excited. Don't clap too much, because Brittany's going to come up here and say, "We're having twins." She's always got to one-up me. We are, of course, tremendously excited about what this will mean for our life, but it also has me thinking about what the future for Toledo holds. I want our son to grow up in a city that is thriving, inclusive, and full of opportunity. The decisions we make as a city today will make that possible. And I'm more committed than ever to making sure our children inherit the kind of city we can be proud of. I'm excited to hear the vision that our mayor will share with us tonight. And I'm committed to working with residents and members of council to shape our community. I'd now like to introduce my friend and colleague, Councilwoman Dr. Brittany Jones, to share a few words. If we continue to work together and stay committed to our vision, there is no limit to what Toledo can achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Driscoll. And yes, we are having twins as well. So, but good evening, everyone. It is an honor to stand before you tonight, not only as a councilwoman, but as someone deeply invested in the well-being of every resident in this city. My journey has always been about empowerment, empowering communities through knowledge, through data, and through action. That's what brought me to public service, and that what continues to drive my work. Toledo must be a place where all families, regardless of zip code, have access to safe neighborhoods, quality education, economic opportunities, and a healthy environment. This means continuing to make investments in public infrastructure so our streets, sidewalks, and public spaces work for everyone. It means ensuring our schools and early childhood programs are preparing young people for a bright future. It means strengthening public safety while addressing the root causes of crime. We cannot talk about progress without talking about economic opportunity. Family needs access to jobs that pay a living wage. Small businesses need to support to grow. And our policies must be designed to uplift, not create roadblocks. We also cannot afford to ignore sustainability. From environmental justice to food security, we have the responsibility to protect Toledo's natural resources while ensuring every resident has access to clean air, water, and healthy food. The challenges we face require both immediate action and long-term vision. That's why I believe in evidence-based policymaking, using data and research to guide decisions that truly improve people's lives. But beyond the numbers, my work is about people. It's about the single parent working 2 jobs to make ends meet, the small business owner trying to build legacy, not just for the next 5 years, but for the next generation. As we reflect on our responsibilities and the work ahead, I know Mayor Wade Kapszukiewicz will outline a vision, again, not only for the next 5 years, but for the next generation. His leadership has produced the once-in-a-generation investments in infrastructure, innovation, and inclusivity that are shaping the future of Toledo. As I prepare to welcome twins into the world, and as someone who is also raising a 2-year-old, I find myself thinking more and more about the Toledo they will grow up in. Will it be a city that nurtures their potential, where opportunity isn't dictated by where you live or who you know? A city that prioritizes families, invests in its people, and protects the environment they will inherit? I believe the answer can be yes, but only if we make it so. The work we do today will determine the Toledo for tomorrow, again, not just for the next 5 years, but for my children's generation, or our children's generation. So, it is my honor to introduce our mayor, Wade Kapszukiewicz.
Well, Councilman Driscoll is welcoming his first child, or his wife, into the world next week. Councilwoman Dr. Jones is having twins. My wife is in the audience tonight, and I would like to announce that we are done having children. Yes, and she applauds. Thank you so much, Councilman Driscoll and Councilwoman Dr. Jones, for those kind words. I'd like to thank all members of the City Council who are able to be here tonight. I think we have a quorum. I think we have almost everyone. I see our president, Carrie Hartman, Councilwoman Sir Sandra McPherson. Next to her is Nick Comives. We've heard from Councilwoman Dr. Jones, Mac Driscoll, Adam Martinez, Sam Meldon, and George Sarantu. I want to thank all of them because truly the work we do together as partners. I want to thank Nick Ide, who just walked in. He's waving in the back. Nick owns this building, and I want to thank him for making it available to us this evening. I want to thank my wife, Sarah, who is with us this evening. We will be married 24 years this summer, and, okay, sure. We're just giving out applause tonight for almost anything. So if I have been with my actual wife for 24 years. I have been with Karen Poor for 25 years. And she is sometimes referred to as my work wife. I didn't invent that phrase, but it has been said. And I want to recognize her right at the beginning. Karen is there in the third or fourth row. She is our deputy mayor. She's the safety director of the city of Toledo, and she is retiring. She certainly has earned it. Anyone who's put up with me for 25 years earns a break. When I was on city council in 1999, Karen was on our team. When I became county treasurer, I stole her and took her to the treasurer's office with me, where she was the chief deputy treasurer. When I became mayor, I stole her again and took her to the mayor's office, where she became safety director and deputy mayor. She doesn't like the limelight, but I did let her see this photo just so she could approve it. And she said, "Oh, I remember that photo. That was our first week in the mayor's office. And the reason I was smiling is because I believed you when you told me that this was going to be fun." And then she immediately turned and stormed out angrily, almost suggesting that it really wasn't as fun as I had promised. And maybe that's because among her other duties, Karen's in charge of police and fire negotiations. But nonetheless, every bit of the 25 years I've been with Karen has been fun. And we're going to miss her, but we sense that we'll be working with her in different capacities over the years. So I want to thank her right at the beginning. Before I go too much further, I want to answer some questions that you might have. You might be saying to yourself, what are these newspapers that are on my chair? What's this newspaper up on the screen? If you remember the invitation we sent out to this several weeks ago, it had this newspaper theme. If you look carefully, first of all, it has some strange headlines. And if you look at the date, it is March 5th, but it is not March 5th, 2025, it's March 5th, 2040. We're trying to envision what Toledo could be like in 15 years if we make the right decisions, if we're daring enough to do what needs to be done. So we kind of had a little bit of fun with these headlines. If you look at the paper, you'll see headlines of things that could well be true. We talk about alga blooms being a thing of the past. Remember alga blooms? What were those things that we used to have to deal with that we don't deal with anymore? We think there's a little fun story in there about the Wayman Palmer YMCA celebrating its 15-year anniversary, when in reality, the Wayman Palmer YMCA opened today. There are headlines about different things that contemplate what our future could be 15 years from now. It is important that we could have chosen any year in the future, but we chose a census year of 2040. That's a year that we're going to be doing a census in this country every 10 years, and I think that is significant in reasons that I'll get to in a moment. I must say, and this is perhaps a reflection of my sense of humor, it was everything I could do to not include a story whose headline was 102-year-old Finkbeiner files to run for mayor. First of all, I have a staff that looks out for me and said, maybe not. But also, since I'm a zest for accuracy, 2040 is not a mayor's race. 2041 would have been. Then it would have been accurate. 103-year-old Finkbeiner files to run for mayor, but we wanted to keep it focused on 2040. Another question you might have is, why are we here? Why are we on the 13th floor of what used to be Owens Corning's world headquarters? This is the 8th State of the City speech I have given. There are always themes, and depending on what the theme is, the location is consistent with the theme. So the year that I wanted to emphasize pre-K and education, we had it at a school over at Wade High School. The year we wanted to highlight all the exciting things the Metro Parks are doing on the riverfront, we had it outside on a very hot day, right on the riverfront. When we wanted to focus the investments we're making in community centers, we had it at the Frederick Douglass Community Center. There is a reason that we're having it here in what for years was an office space that is being converted into residential. I'll let you stew on that for a moment, and maybe in about 20 minutes it'll become clear why we're having it here, but I sense you might have that question, and trust me, the answer is coming, because there is always a theme for why we do the things we do in these speeches. But most importantly, if you're here tonight, you probably have the most important question on your mind. This is the State of the City speech. What is the state of the city? What is the state of our city? Councilman Driscoll, I think, gave a good answer. In my attitude, the state of our city isn't perfect. We're not a perfect city. I don't know that there are perfect cities. We still face a lot of challenges, and we're going to talk about some of those challenges tonight. Our population continues to decline. Our educational attainment isn't where I'd want it to be when you compare ourselves to other cities our size. Channel 13 is falling right off the podium, but I caught it. Channel 11 won't report that I caught it, but I caught the Channel 13 microphone just in time. We're not perfect, but you know what? I don't know that the citizens expect perfection. We all might want perfection. I think, we want, that's our goal. But even as we as human beings fall short of perfection, I think what the citizens anticipate and expect is progress. We haven't attained perfection in Toledo, but we have attained progress. I think we are making real progress in our city, and that's the story of our city. In my judgment, that's the state of our city. It's a city that is not perfect, but it is a city that is making progress. And when I think of the progress we're making, there are four main areas that come to mind for me. Now, while this is going to be a forward-looking speech, again, the 2040 theme and some of the headlines that we could be reading 15 years from now, it is a State of the City speech. I just want to spend a couple minutes kind of looking back over the last year or so and focus on the progress that I think we're making. Then we'll jump to the future for the final part of our speech. So when I say that the state of our city is that we are making progress, I think of four primary areas. The first, and I think most importantly, public safety. We are a safer city than we were this time last year. We're a safer city than we were this time 2 years ago, 5 years ago. We're a safer city on most measurements than we were 30 years ago. Now, that might be inconsistent with what you feel is the case, depending on which national cable news channel you watch or which presidential candidate you voted for. That might be totally counter to what you've been told. But boy, numbers are numbers. You can't, you can have whatever opinion you want, but you can't make up your own numbers. There's a lot of stats we measure. I focus on homicides because we're talking about human life, and there's nothing more important than that. We all know that in 2021, not just in Toledo, but nationwide, there was a spike in violent crime, and cities all over the country saw more violent crime and more homicides than any of us could bear. Toledo did too. But since then, we have really turned the corner. We now, last year, had about half as many homicides as we had just 3 years ago. From 2022 to 2023, that 20 homicide drop represents a 30% reduction. The very next year, when it dropped again by 8, that represented an 18% reduction. So far this year, I know it's early in the year, 60-some days into the year, but this time last year, Toledo had 12 homicides. So far this year, we've had 4 homicides. Now, don't get me wrong, I say this all the time, and I'm going to say it again. That is 4 more than we want. That's 4 more than we can bear. All 4 of those are human beings, and they had people who loved them, and we're not going to be satisfied until there are none. But the fact of the matter is, even after an 18% reduction 2 years, I'm sorry, a 30% reduction 2 years ago and an 18% reduction last year, so far this year, March 5th to March 5th, we're down an additional 67%. We're moving in the right direction. We are consistent now with what our 30-year average is. There's more work to do, but we're going to celebrate the progress we're making. And I should note that it's not just violent crime and homicides that are down. Every stat we measure is down. It just is. Every category from auto thefts, burglaries, robberies. Sometimes people cynically say, sure, the homicides are down, but more people than ever are getting shot. Not true. Fewer people are getting shot. There are fewer shootings. Everything is down. Are we where we want to be? No, we're not perfect, but we are making real progress. A question you might be asking yourself is, well, why? Why are we making so much progress on public safety? I think there are several reasons. Something as complex as crime, there's many reasons that crime happens. So when you turn it around and start to see better results, we can't think that any one thing is going to solve the problem. So it's not any one thing, it's a little bit of everything. The first part of our formula has been adding more police to the streets. I'm not one who believes that that's all you have to do is add more police and voila, crime goes down. No, but it is one of the things you need to do. When I became mayor, there were 580 police officers protecting us. When the class of new cadets begins this year, the number will be 655. And even though there will be retirements throughout the course of the year, there's no question you can see an upward trend. And remember, before 2018, when I became mayor, the size of our force had been steadily declining for 22 consecutive years. When I first met Karen Poor in 1999 on city council, we had 700 police officers. And bit by bit, it had slowly shrunk to the 580 I inherited when I became mayor. We have done the difficult work of growing that number back up. And here's just one example of how important it is to us. When we received the good news earlier this year that Jeep was not going to be laying off 1,200 employees, and therefore we would not be losing $2 million in payroll income tax, we had a choice. City Council, as it prepared its budget, and the administration had a choice to how to deploy those resources. And one of the first things we did was to increase our police class from the 30 that it would have been had we had those layoffs and $2 million of cuts to 45, which is what we're going to have once we realize that we had those resources. There's a lot of needs in this city. We could have done a lot of different things with those resources, but our commitment to making sure that we have men and women on the streets protecting us is crucially important. We've done the hard work to do it. And why is it important? Well, the more officers you have, the more we can do the community policing that we all know works. The officers can get out of their cars and move around and develop relationships with neighbors and business owners. That is not the only reason we're seeing better safety results, but it is one of the reasons. Another reason is our MONSE program. MONSE stands for the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. This is the group run by Malcolm Cunningham, the grassroots, sort of boots on the ground folks who work with people, especially young people, meeting them where they are, and hopefully heading off disagreements or addressing disagreements before they grow, unfortunately, into a homicide. Last year, they prepared a 5-year comprehensive safety strategy for the city of Toledo. It's called Peace in Motion, made 42 very specific recommendations, and as I'm going to mention in a moment, we're already acting on some of those recommendations. They also did something interesting. They calculated the cost of what a homicide is to this community. And I'm talking numeric cost. You think about it, whenever there is a homicide, there's a detective that has to spend staff time in investigating it and hopefully solving it. There are police officers. Then when it comes to the trial, a lot of times the defendant's going to need a public defender, and there's incarceration costs and blah, blah, on and on and on and on. It adds up to about $900,000 per homicide. I am most excited that last year, when our homicide rate went down again by an additional 18%, that meant there were 8 human beings who didn't lose their life in our city. That's the most important thing to me. But there's another interesting way to look at it that Monsi has helped me understand, and that is to put it this way, frankly, we saved $7.1 million in sort of unnecessary costs. That's $7.1 million that we didn't have to spend through the criminal justice system and the investigations and all that jazz, could have been better spent and should be spent investing in kids, investing in youth programming, investing in parks, investing in ourselves. That's another way to look at it, and Monsi has helped us do that this year. The work that they do has now extended into our schools. They're in 4 different high schools. Last year, they reached 88 students and conducted 104 mediations. They're making a difference. And frankly, last year, because of their work, we saw the fewest youth homicides in the city of Toledo since 2019. A lot of work to do, but we're making progress. We're making steps in the right direction. Another reason we're seeing better safety outcomes in our city is the investments we're making in youth programming. Council, over the last 4 years, City Council has invested $7.2 million in youth programming. In this year's budget, we again made a commitment, and I want to give credit to City Council, based on what my recommendation for youth programming was. They said, no, that's not good enough, and they increased it. I believe Councilwoman McPherson proposed that amendment, so we're doing even more youth programming this year than we had planned. What has it added up to? Well, that $7.2 million is 322 different programs that over those 4 years have served 200,000 kids. Now, not 200,000 different kids. It could have been the same kid, making multiple visits to our program. But boy, that matters. That's important stuff. And you might think, well, big deal, summer basketball, summer football. It's not just that. Yeah, we do have summer sports programs, but it's anything and everything a kid might want to do. I mean, we have, kids who are you want to learn how to cook? There's a program that'll teach you to cook, teach you to garden. You want to learn how to podcast or code. I say it a lot because it sounds a little silly, but it makes my point. One of those 322 programs taught kids who wanted to learn how to ride a horse. My point is, we will do anything. We will provide every opportunity to kids to have productive, positive things to do, especially during the summers. And with the help of City Council, we're investing in it. We're investing real dollars in it. We're doing it. Thousands of kids are taking advantage of it, and it's all across the board, and we're going to keep doing it. Thank you. It's our Parks and Youth Services Department that administers a lot of this work. Because of the excellent work they've done, that's one of the reasons that Big Brothers Big Sisters of Northwest Ohio honored them as the Partner of the Year last year. That's a photo of them winning their award. And earlier I mentioned the Save Our Community team. The Monsi team made 42 specific recommendations on what we could do to help lower crime, and we're acting on some of them. One of the ones I want to point out is this. Hey, it's great that we have enrichment programs. You want to learn how to podcast, code, cook, play basketball, whatever it is. We do all that. But one of the recommendations that came out of Monsi was, you know what, kids could also use a summer job, to get a little money, to develop a skill and some entrepreneurial spirit. So we took that recommendation seriously, and what we decided to do was create what we called the Impact Movement Mowing Program. And so last year, there were kids out there doing a service, doing something positive and healthy and productive. Goodness knows they have a lot of negative distractions, especially during the summertime, that could occupy their time. we added this to the mix as well. So we're gonna try to get kids more summer jobs as well. The final thing I think that we can say as a reason that we're seeing better safety outcomes is that we're fighting blight. We're fighting blight better than we have in the past. And there is a real link between blight in a neighborhood and crime. If you feel as though your neighborhood has been ignored by the city, that no one cares about your neighborhood because there's abandoned tires in the, in the alley, or the house next door is falling apart, you might think, well, heck, no one cares, I don't care either, and you could find your way getting distracted into doing something negative. So eliminating that and fighting blight is a big part of turning the corner. And one of the reasons that we have seen such a drastic reduction in crime is that we're fighting blight better than we have before. We demolished 300 homes last year. We collected over 1.2 million pounds of waste. One of the ways to prevent blight is to fight blight, is to prevent it from ever happening in the first place. So our neighborhoods department helped people replace 40 different roofs last year. We rehabbed 25 homes out of whole cloth, conducted 68 emergency repairs, and yes, we planted 1,400 trees. We are going to move forward on our tree planting program this year. You might remember we got a $6.1 million grant from the U.S. Department of Forestry called Re-Tree Toledo. We're going to plant 10,000 trees over the next 4 years. You may have heard there is some doubt as to whether the federal government is going to give cities the grants that they fought so hard to earn. The dysfunction in Washington is the dysfunction in Washington. In Toledo, we're going to do what needs to be done one way or another. We're planting those trees, and it starts this year. 10,000 trees in the city over the next 5 years, and we're starting in earnest this year. There's a lot of, City Council is starting the applause. That is a first. That is a first. Sometimes when City Council waves at me, they don't wave with all 5 fingers. So tonight, it's we're coming together wonderfully. So for all these reasons, safety, we're in a better place than we have been in public safety. But there's one last piece of the puzzle, and that's leadership. We need leadership to make sure we continue this progress. Karen Poor, she is the deputy mayor. She's also our safety director. Again, she's retiring. We need a new safety director. Tonight, I'm happy to announce that I've selected the person that I think should be Toledo's next safety director. We'll be sending his name to City Council for confirmation, but in the meantime, he starts Monday, and he's here tonight, so I'd like to introduce him as someone you know, because for years he was the police chief in the city of Toledo, went to work for the state for a little bit. Now he's back because he told us his heart was always in Toledo. George Krull, former police chief of the city of Toledo, is going to be the full-time safety director of our city, and will, from a leadership perspective, be able to continue the good work that we're doing. So we're not where we want to be on public safety. We won't rest until there are no homicides and there are no burglaries, but there's no question we are making progress. We're moving in the right direction. The second area where I will say that we're making tremendous progress in our community, in our city, is on the area of economic and community development. Don't just take my word for it. I'm a politician. I might be lying to you. There should have been some laughter there, but unfortunately there wasn't. Let's take the word of Site Selection magazine, which is sort of the Bible when it comes to economic development in this country. Just this week, Monday, we once again were named in the top 10 cities for new business investment. That now marks 9 of the last 11 years. Toledo has ranked in the top 10 cities in the entire country in new business investment. Not top 10 in Ohio, sure, not top 10 in Northwest Ohio. We're not top 10 in the Great Lakes region. We are top 10 in the entire country in terms of new business investment. A lot of times people have opinions about things and how things are going, and I get it, but the facts are the facts. The folks who study this professionally for a living have looked at Toledo, and for the better part of the decade have said that the economic vitality that is happening here is among the best cities in our country. 9 out of 11 years, top 10 in the country. And why not? We are making real investments, economic development investments and neighborhood investments. I mentioned it earlier, I'm going to say it again. 1 hour ago, well, let's see what time it is. Well, 1 hour and 19 minutes ago, the Wayman Palmer YMCA opened. There you go. That is a neighborhood That's the Warren Sherman neighborhood needed investment. It had been ignored for too many years. This is maybe a little example of self-congratulation that I'm loath to do, but it's just true. It's just true. That YMCA would not have been built without the city of Toledo. We invested $18.5 million into that. I believe that was $18.5 million more than anyone else, which isn't entirely true, but we felt it was important that the kids in that neighborhood, in all of our neighborhoods, have access to the most excellent services that you'd find anywhere in this region, and I am really proud that that YMCA is open today. We're making improvements to Savage Park. That's coming this summer. We've made a ton of improvements at the riverfront, the Glass City Metro Park. Remember, it wasn't too long ago, when they knocked down the sports arena, there was just kind of a road that went nowhere. I mean, nothing was going on at the Marina project for 15 years. Now look at what we've done. This ribbon here opened 2 years ago in the Glass City Metro Park. But here's what I think is important. Sure, it's a great amenity. It's drawing people from all over the region. It's one of the top attractions anywhere in Northwest Ohio. It's great. But if all it was just kind of a fun thing that happened down on the riverfront and then everyone got in their cars and drove home, we'd be missing something. What excites me most about this is that in the 2 years since that opened, home ownership in the Garfield neighborhood, and the Garfield neighborhood is the neighborhood right sort of in between that ribbon and Waite High School. It's the neighborhood that kind of wraps around Waite High School in East Toledo. Home ownership in that neighborhood has doubled just in the 2 years since this opened. That's how this works. We don't do it because it's just flashy and nice, and I mean, it is flashy and nice, but we want it to spill into the neighborhoods and help lifting up the entire, that's how economic development works. So we started on the east side of the river. Now this year, you might notice we've jumped across the river, and we're going to start make investments that we think and we hope are going to spill over into the Vistula neighborhood. Earlier this year, Toledo Pickle opened. You can see people pickling there in the photo, but we're not going to stop there. We're going to move we're moving down also on the west side of the river, but heading toward the high-level bridge. The Glass City Riverwalk is going to bring all kinds of amenities to our riverfront. Again, are we perfect? No. Are we making progress? Unquestionably. No one can say that we're not making progress. Think of what this looked like, what the riverfront looked like even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There was literally a road that went nowhere. Now look at what we have. Talking about spaces that had been vacant and unloved for a long time that have had life breathed into them. I think of the Jefferson Center, or as we now call it, the Innovation Post. 1 year ago, I gave this speech, my State of the City speech, at the Jefferson Center because we wanted to highlight the opportunity there, and I made a promise that within a year, it would be half occupied. It's important. When I make promises, we try to follow through on them, and we beat the deadline by a week, 2 weeks, because 2 weeks ago, we announced that there are 4 knowledge jobs that have brought 170, or companies that have brought 170 jobs to the Innovation Post, engineering firms, economic development professionals, and it's not half full. It is with those jobs, it's now 60% occupied, and we think it could be fully occupied by the end of this year. That's progress. For a number of years, the Northtown Mall was vacant, blighted, not a lot of positive things happening there. Now, it's a place where apparently I make Jennifer Granholm laugh, whatever I was saying, I don't remember. But what we're doing is we're taking a tour of Mobis. Mobis is a tier 1 supplier to the auto industry. The investment it made there, Mobis made a $28 million investment, brought 185 manufacturing jobs to that site. When I think of the progress we're making, it's not just big projects like the riverfront or Mobis or even the Jefferson Center. I think of the work we're doing at the neighborhood level through the Vibrancy Initiative. Again, City Council has been a leader in making sure that we have the resources to lift up the Vibrancy neighborhood. And it's more about small business. Last year, $21.6 million in private investment was activated because of the Vibrancy Initiative. That's 18 different projects, activated over 132,000 square feet of previously vacant property. And again, this is about the neighborhoods. And so one of the recipients was just about as classic a small business as we have in Toledo. Stanley's Market over there on Stickney was the recipient of a Vibrancy Initiative. Again, creating the jobs and economic momentum that people are starting to notice. Goodness knows Site Selection Magazine has noticed it. This is the reason that 9 out of the last 11 years, we've been ranked up there as a top 10 city in this nation for economic development. And this is one of the many reasons that our Director of Economic Development, Brandon Selhorst, last year was honored as the Economic Development Professional of the Year in the entire state of Ohio by the Ohio Economic Development Association. Here he is accepting his award. Looking as cheerful and handsome as ever. So we know that there's more good work that Brandon's going to be doing. Third area where we're seeing real improvement is infrastructure. When I think of infrastructure, I think of at least two things: roads and lead lines. In terms of roads, I talk about it all the time. I say it till I'm blue in the face, but I'm going to keep saying it. We are making so much progress on roads, and this graph says it all. The citizens in the fall of 2020 passed the Toledo roads levy. Before that levy passed, look how unreliable our road program was. There were some years, like 2017, where the city did an okay job of fixing roads, but there were years like 2016 where they did not fix a singular road, not one. 0 roads were resurfaced that year. Since the roads levy passed, every year, year after year, we're doing at least 40 lane miles. In 2020, we did 2.88 lane miles. The very next year, it jumped up and it's 44, 51, 40. It's a 15-fold increase. And in terms of the number of roads, again, 2016, it was 0. 2020, it was 7. This year, we are resurfacing 114 residential roads. We do about 100 per year every year. There's no question that we are making a real difference on infrastructure. And now, when we fix a road, we do it with an eye towards safety, not just safety for cars, but safety for everyone who would travel on that road, whether you're a pedestrian, a bicyclist. And so we will do things to slow traffic. We might narrow the road. We might put in a bike lane. We might put in one of those super popular things that everyone loves called a roundabout. We will do whatever it takes to slow traffic. That is as much our goal as simply resurfacing a road. We're making progress. And lead lines, I mentioned that earlier. If you remember what happened in Flint about a decade ago, that is not going to happen in Toledo because by the end of next year, because of our investment in infrastructure, every private lead service line in our city will have been removed. We talked about this about 3 or 4 years ago, and we said, well, we have a plan, and if we fund it this way, we think we might be done in 30 years. Well, we made the investments necessary to finish the job in about 3 years. It'll be done next year. There will be no private lead service lines anywhere in this city. Are we a perfect city? No. Are we making progress? You bet. The fourth and final area where we are making progress is in our financial picture. There's 2 things that stand out to me when I make that claim. One is that for the first time in 14 years, Moody's and Standard & Poor, who give us our bond rating, give our city our bond rating every year, improved Toledo's bond rating. Not a lot of people might know what that means. It's a little inside baseball, but basically the city's bond rating will determine what we taxpayers have to pay when we pay back the bonds on a big project. So when we're doing roads, when we're fixing the water treatment plant, and anything big that we have to borrow money on, we got to pay it back. The better your bond rating is, the less we have to pay in interest. It is hard to, those folks are sticklers. We go to New York or Chicago every year. We meet them face to face. They are hard to please. And they don't give increases easily. But for the first time in 14 years, they looked at our books and they said, these folks seem to know what they're doing. The city's moving the right direction. We're going to improve their bond rating. That's going to save our taxpayers millions of dollars in interest payments moving forward. And the other thing, graphically, that's really clear in terms of an improved situation is our rainy day fund, our budget stabilization fund. Not today on March 5th, but at the end of this year, at the end of 2025, we will have $60 million in our rainy day fund. That is 15 times larger than it was 10 years ago. We had $4 million in our rainy day fund 10 years ago. We will have $60 million in our rainy day fund at the end of this year. For all of these reasons, we are making progress. What is the state of our city? The state of our city is that we are a city making progress. Not perfect. Perfection is hard to attain, but progress. That's the story of our city. And as I conclude the sort of backwards look at where we've been, I feel good about the progress we made. but we have a lot more progress to make, because the reality is, and the focus now for the remainder of the speech, will be on some of the challenges we continue to have as a city, and frankly, some of the problems that we have. We're not going to just focus on the problems and navel gaze and twiddle our thumbs and feel sorry for ourselves. We're also going to talk about what we can do to address the problems. But we have problems. One of those problems is that we have a structural budget deficit. We have a structural budget deficit in the city of Toledo. How do we know that? What is the proof that that is the case? Well, there's two things. One is we have to eat into that rainy day fund in order to balance our general fund. Now, it is true, it is a large rainy day fund, historically speaking. It is 15 times larger than it was 10 years ago. But still, every year, bit by bit, we have to borrow from it to meet our obligations. We're okay now, we're okay. But long term, that's not a winning strategy, all right? It's not a winning strategy. The second reason that you can tell, the second bit of evidence you can tell that we have a structural budget deficit, is that to meet our obligations, every year we have to transfer money out of the capital fund, money that was supposed to go to fix capital projects, into the general fund. Okay, well, that's proof that we have a structural budget deficit. Fine. You might be saying, well, why? Why do we have a structural budget deficit? Don't we have the same tax rate as all the other big cities in Ohio? It's true. With the exception of Cincinnati, which is kind of, they have a weird hybrid tax system. It's not apples to apples. All the other cities have the same 2.5% payroll income tax that we do. Columbus, Cleveland, Akron, Dayton, all of them. They have 2.5%, we have 2.5%. Okay, you might be saying to yourself, that doesn't really answer my question. If our tax rate is the same, again, why do we have a problem? Aha, you might say, it must be that those politicians down at City Hall are spending like drunken sailors, that there's a lot of government waste, you're spending, we got to find someone with a chainsaw who might be a trillionaire in a couple years to come and doge up City Hall and cut all the waste. Okay, you can believe that if you want. It is as far from fact as you could possibly be, because the reality is, and I'm going to say this with clarity because it's going to surprise people, but it just is true. We do have a spending problem down at City Hall. You know what our problem is? We don't spend nearly enough. We spend less per capita in Toledo than any other big city in Ohio by a wide margin, and we spend less on every category. So not only do we spend less than Dayton, less than Columbus, we spend less on police than all those cities. We spend less on fire, we spend less on parks, we spend less on kids. We don't have a spending problem. Ideologically, you might think that we do, or it just in your heart, out of a spirit of truthiness, you just want that to be the case. It just isn't. We are not going to cut our way out of our problems. We're not going to get where we want to go by cutting down on paperclip abuse. We already spend less than everyone else. What does it say about us in our city that some people's answer is cut more? Oh, you're already dead last? Well, then what you need to do is cut. Here's a chainsaw. Fine. People, you can believe what you want. The reality is we don't have a spending problem. We have a revenue problem. That's our problem. We have a revenue problem. Our 2.5% payroll income tax is the same that they apply in all those other cities. The problem is those other cities are wealthier than Toledo. We are less wealthy. So the 2.5% income tax in Columbus is applied to a larger pie. It's applied onto a wealthier citizenry. It produces more money. We are less wealthy in Toledo. And so on a per capita basis, we spend less than everyone else because our money doesn't go as far. Okay, fine, great, Wade, you've diagnosed the problem. What do we do about it? Well, it could be. We are not here right now. I am not proposing this. I notice friends in the media and Channel 13's mic keeps falling onto my lap, so I want to make this clear. I'm not proposing this. We are not there yet. But it could be, at some point in the future, we might have to think about a police and fire levy. We all know how much police and fire, what a large percentage of the general fund that is. It's an overwhelming supermajority of our budget goes to police and fire. And by the way, I'm glad. It should. The citizens expect it. They deserve it. We want to do it. It has to happen. But it is such a large percentage of our budget, at some point, we might need to free up some resources by looking at a police fire levy. We're not there yet. We might get there. At any rate, though, that would be a short-term solution. There is a better solution that we should all support, because there's two ways to get out of this problem. One is to raise a tax, which none of us want to do. The other is to grow our population, which we should all want to do. That is what I want to focus on now, because no matter what we do in the short term, the long-term solution to whatever our problems are is to start growing again. It is time for Toledo to grow. Now, we're no different than every other city in this part of the country. Call it what you will, Snow Belt, Rust Belt, I think it should be the Water Belt, Great Lakes region, whatever you want to call it. Every city, from Buffalo to Milwaukee, Fort Wayne, all of them have lost hundreds of thousands of people since 1950s, and for all the same reasons, whether it was NAFTA, globalization, bad trade deals, the completion of the interstate highway system, the fact that, hey, wait a second, I can get on a plane now and live in Tucson. What am I doing up here in Buffalo where it snows? A lot of reasons. Cities all over this region have seen massive population loss, and Toledo has too. But I want you to notice something about these graphs. On the far right-hand part of the graph, these cities look like there's a little spoon at the end. What that spoon means is that those cities have stopped losing population and they've started growing again. All of those cities have started adding population, even Detroit, Michigan. I don't mean Southeast Michigan is growing. I'm not talking about Wayne County growing. I'm talking about the Municipal Corporation of Detroit, Michigan is growing. For the first time since 1957 last year, Detroit grew. If Detroit can grow, it is time for Toledo. There's no more excuses. It is time for us to grow, because when you look at our graph, yeah, we've lost just as much population as they did. There's no little upward spoon at the end. We have continued to lose population. Our population peaked in 1970, 380,000 people. Now we're at about 271,000. We've lost 110,000 people in my lifetime. Okay, so did Buffalo, so did Cincinnati, so did Pittsburgh, so did Detroit. They've all lost, but they've stopped losing and they're growing again. It's time for us to do it. Great. Once again, Wade, you've diagnosed the problem. How do we do it? According to the reports that we have done, most importantly, the 2021 housing study, which identified right now a need and a demand for 10,000 additional units of housing, what we need is more housing. We have a supply problem, not a demand problem. There is a demand for housing in Toledo. That 10,000 number I just quoted from the report wasn't like, hey, if we build 10,000 new units, maybe someone will live there. No. It was, there would be 10,000 people occupying those 10,000 units if only we had them. If we're going to grow, we need to address our supply problem, okay? And finally, maybe a half an hour into the speech, we have arrived at why we are here in this space, what the theme of this year's speech is. We are in the Fiberglass Tower, Owens Corning's world headquarters. Owens Corning was born in that building across the street on Halloween night, strangely, of 1938. That's when that was OI's world headquarters. People of a certain generation will remember the OI at the top of the building that now is on the top of Owens Community College. They have liquid papered out the I, so they just says O. Anyhow, it's story time. This is my staff worried about. You got to stay on it. All right. Anyhow, that was world headquarters for OI, and so Owens Corning was born there out of their research and development team in the late 1930s. After about 30 years, they were getting big, they were getting successful, and they said to themselves, well, wait a second, we need our own headquarters. And so they built this building. Ground was broken on May 1st, 1967. It opened in 1971. Here are some images of it happening. For about a decade, it was the tallest building in Toledo until OI itself needed more space, so they built one Seagate, which then became Toledo's tallest building. And it was office space. It was office space. People like Bill Betchenstein, who was the CEO, there he is in his desk with his styrofoam cup and aged Don Draper look. You know, this was office space. People were here doing office things, okay? Great. That's what the world looked like in the mid to late 20th century. That is not the world anymore. Especially since the pandemic, remote work is real, and cities all over the country have a real problem with vacant office space. It's a real problem. You might argue that we have twin problems in Toledo. We have a problem of vacant office space in our core, and we have a declining population problem. Well, actually, we could solve both problems at the same time if we can convert spaces like this into residential. That's why we're here. That's what we want to talk about tonight. Look, other cities have this problem, but unfortunately, Toledo has it worse than most other cities. The national average of vacant office space in America right now is about 20%. We're at 30%. And I want to define what this means. These are buildings and spaces that are totally and completely vacant. So I'm talking about the Spitzer building. I'm talking about the Pythian Castle. This list of entirely, totally, completely empty buildings, it adds up to about 1.4 million square feet of vacant space. Do you know what that's the equivalent of? The Franklin Park Mall. We have a Franklin Park Mall equivalent of vacant space in our core, but actually the problem is worse than that. Because if you take the buildings that are partially occupied, so 1 Seagate, there's plenty of floors that are activated, plenty of office space at work there. Same thing with 4 Seagate, same thing with the HCR Manor Care building, or whatever it's called now, it might be a ProMedica building. They're sort of full, but they're not totally full. If you add up the vacant space in those buildings, it's an additional 1.6 million square feet of vacant office space. So you can think of the core of our city as having 2 Franklin Park Malls amount of space. So that is a real problem. Other cities have vacancy rate problems, you know, because remote work is real and Don Draper isn't coming back to work here in this building anymore. We got a problem, we got that problem, but we have it worse than most other cities. And we have a declining population problem. Other cities have started to correct it, we haven't. Fortunately, we have the ability to solve both problems at once if we can do a better job converting spaces like this. That is what Nick Ide is doing in this space. Here is a rendering, an architectural rendering of what Nick and his team are doing to the 13th floor here. It used to be office. It's going to be a place where people are going to live, because the reality is there is a market for people to live in downtown Toledo. There really is. There are 4,000 people living in downtown Toledo right now. And this stat will blow your mind, but it makes the point. This century, since the census of 2000, so the last 25 years, the city of Toledo as a whole has lost about lost about 40,000 people. Our population has shrunk by about 40,000 people since the 2000 census. But during that same length of time as our city-wide, as we've lost 40,000 people, the downtown has grown by 32%. We've added about 1,000 people into this neighborhood during that same time. So that shows there is a market. People want to be here right now. We need to help make it happen. Downtown right now could support between 1,000 to 1,300 additional units, we think, over the next decade. Other communities are doing this, so we need to do it or we're going to lose ground. These are options that exist right now for the type of dense housing that we're talking about in our suburban communities. So Mosaic at Levis Commons, the Chelsea Place in Sylvania, the Preston Gardens in Pearsburg, those are wonderful options for people that they have right now. If we don't do better here, folks are going to continue to move to those places, and our population is going to continue to decline. Fortunately, we know this is a problem, and we're starting to address it as a city. Right now, there are 23 active projects that the city is involved with in one way or another. Here are some of them, right here. And as you can see, and they're in various stages of completion. Some are already done, some are on the way to being done. And when you look, it adds it up, it's about 1,900 units. That's great, but when you remember that 2021 housing study that says we need 10,000 right now, what that tells you is what we're working on is great. It's 1/5 of what we need. We need to do what we're doing and put it on overdrive. If the federal government wants to help, we will take their help. And there's a model. In the last Congress, House Resolution 9002, called the Bipartisan Revitalizing Downtowns and Main Streets Act, was introduced. It's one of the rarest things in Washington that exists, a truly bipartisan bill. Jimmy Gomez, a Democrat from California, and Mike Carey, actually a Republican from downstate in Ohio, here co-sponsored a bill that essentially would create a tax credit for developers to help convert these spaces from the office it used to be to the residential that it needs to be. It's very expensive to do it, and it will be modeled after the historic tax credit problem that actually the Four Corners recently won $20 million for. If the federal government wants to help, that's one way it can help. But in the meantime, as Washington tries to get its act together, I have a proposal. And it's a proposal we've discussed a little bit with City Council, but it is a way that we can free up money in this case, $25 million for these sorts of conversions. It could happen anywhere. There's no particular building we have in mind, but it is modeled after what we did about 25 or 30 years ago. If you remember these 5 projects, the Hillcrest, Commodore Perry, LaSalle, they were all vacant in the mid-90s. You know, LaSalle was an old department store, the Hillcrest and Commodore Perry were hotels. Regardless, they were all vacant. But the city borrowed money to free up tens of millions of dollars to bring them back to life. And you know what? It worked. They're all full now. There are waiting lists at these places. And that act was the catalyst for all of the activity you see downtown here. There would have been no Gwen Stefani concert, which I think that's a picture of, had those buildings not been brought to life. The Mud Hens wouldn't be here, the Walleye wouldn't be here. All of the Valentine Theater, activating those buildings was the first boulder that moved to the turnaround of the downtown core. So there's a model. We've done it once, we can do it again, but this time let's just do it a little smarter. Because as exciting as that was, if there was a drawback, it was that when the city borrowed the money, these properties were privately owned. For instance, the Hillcrest and the LaSalle was owned by a guy named Randy Alexander from Madison, Wisconsin. So great, the city borrows money. City council has been paying back the interest, $1.6 million a year for 30 years, and that money has been going out of town to Madison, Wisconsin to pay back Randy Alexander and others. I'm not criticizing the initiative because we need those buildings to be full, and I'm glad they are. But let's do that same thing again and just be a little smarter. If the public can come to own some of these buildings, so just to take an example, like right now the Land Bank owns the Spitzer building, as we might know. If we can develop that kind of a model where the public has ownership of these buildings, and then we could do something unique. We could enter into a 45-year ground lease with the developer. Again, we could issue a 30-year, $25 million general obligation bond. The city would provide a patient capital loan. The loan repayment would be made with cash from the project. Interestingly, the payback on that would be $1.6 million. Well, the $1.6 million loans from 30 years ago, the city has been paying back. Some of them have been all paid off already. I think the last ones cycle off our books in 2026 or 2027, but it's happening in real time. We could undertake a similar program without it feeling too different from our budget. In other words, for the last 30 years, we've already been paying $1.6 million in bond repayments to activate historic buildings, and we're glad we did it. We could do the same thing again without it feeling like a traumatic event to our budget. And in the process, we would be activating the housing that we need in this community, and if we can find a public partner to do it, instead of sending that money out of town to places like Madison, Wisconsin, we could keep it here in Toledo. That is an idea in real time that could help the conversion that we need. Fact of the matter is other cities are doing it. Cities smaller than Toledo like Dayton, cities, that's on the left, cities the same size of Toledo like Fort Wayne in the middle, bigger cities like Chicago are all making this conversion right now, but we can't stop at downtown. We need to do things like this citywide. We need all kinds of housing in Toledo, all kinds. We need market rate, we need affordable, we need workforce. And actually in the last year, we've been bringing that online all across our city, in the neighborhoods of our city. Just last year, the city invested in 230 affordable units for seniors, families, kids aging out of foster care, the Colony Lofts. I just visited that a couple of weeks ago. That's 262 market rate units. Just last week, 70 ground was broken for 70 new affordable units at the Grand and the Glen. If we remember Collingwood Green 5 from last summer, that's going to be senior housing. We need all kinds of that housing all throughout Toledo, and we are starting to do it. One of the things that we have to continue to do is to create new homeowners in this city. The Home at Last program created 35 new homeowners last year. We hosted our first ever home ownership fair this past year. 300 prospective home buyers were there. A landlord education fair, 150 landlords attended. Our Forward Toledo plan, which is a grant, we actually received a $4 million grant to implement what's going to be our zoning code rewrite, essentially. It's going to streamline our permitting process and create a template for developers. And I can't mention grants without giving a shout out to Simon Nee and our grants team, who continue to just absolutely kick rear end when it comes to, look at these numbers. This is 2 years in a row the city has set its all-time record in bringing in tax dollars. We are careful. It's important to us that we don't just run to the voters or run to the taxpayers asking for tax increases when we need money. No, we look under the cushions. We compete for money, all of it, and no one brings in grant money the way Simon and his team do. Look at this. I mean, look at the growth of that just over the last 3 years. On a per capita basis, only Cleveland brought in more grant money than Toledo last year. And on a per capita basis, we are right there with New York, Chicago, and LA. And big stuff too. I mean, we got grants, $1.1 million from the National Park Service for the work I talked about earlier at Savage Park, $1.6 million to fix fire station roofs that's badly needed. I mentioned Malcolm and the Muncie team earlier. They got a $1 million grant to actually expand into more schools. The biggest ever grant that the city of Toledo has ever received was a $28.5 million U.S. Department of Transportation grant to supplement the work we're doing with the Glass City Metro Park in Front and Main. I mentioned it once before, I have to say it again. It is unclear whether this money that we have competed for nationally and won is ever going to make it to us. You know, the federal government has announced, it sounds like that they are going to freeze this money, or they might freeze this money. It's unclear. It's murky as to whether this money that we have fought for and competed with and earned is ever going to make it to us. And without being too cynical, one of my fears is that the reason that this is happening is because you know, the wealthiest among us in this nation are going to be getting a tax cut pretty soon. And I get it. Look, Elon Musk isn't going to become a trillionaire until 2027. He's going to need to tide himself over for a couple of years, so of course he's going to need a tax cut. Fine. If that's what they do, fine. But I'm telling you, when that happens, I just want everyone to know that that money is taken away, will be taken away from the kids at Savage Park, from our firefighters who won't have their roofs fixed, from the kids who won't have violence prevention efforts in their school. Fine, you want to give a tax cut to the world's first trillionaire, you go right ahead. It's the kids of our neighborhood and our neighborhoods that would be losing, and I'll just leave it at that and let you reflect on it however you may want to. We have to continue to do innovative things, including a program that for 2 years I've wanted to talk about, that they won't let me talk about. They didn't let me talk about, but I insisted. I said, the heck with it. I have the microphone, and I'm just going to talk about it because it's important. It is the Toledo Police Next Door program. This is entirely privately funded, and it has been for 2 years. Not one dime of public money has gone into this. It is private donations, and what it does is provides incentives for police officers who don't live in the city of Toledo to move into the city of Toledo. They get a $25,000 down payment assistance for their home. Any home in Toledo has to be their primary residence. If it's a second mortgage, requires no payments, and if they're still living in that home in 5 years, the loan is forgiven. 14 police officers who did not live in Toledo now live in Toledo because of this program, and you know, they brought their spouses and their kids with them. It's a good thing. We have to continue to do things like this because it's also good having a police officer in your neighborhood. We got to keep doing things like that. Again, all of this contributes to what we need to do, and that is to grow our population. As we do this, we're heartened by the fact that Toledo is a good city, made up of good people. It always has been, it always will be, and we always use this space, this time, to honor the best citizens among us with what we call the Irene Guard Award. Now, as a reminder as to who Irene Guard was, she was a 15-year-old Woodward High School student back in 1922, and when her class was learning about compound interest and how compound interest works, she said, I have an idea. I'm going to put $21 in the bank, and in 100 years, it will grow to about $1,000. I think it was $1,005. And I want the mayor of Toledo, whoever that person is 100 years from now, to get this money. I don't care what he or she does with it, but she did leave a note. The note to the mayor read, use it for the betterment of our city. She didn't care, she just wanted to use it for the betterment of the city. Unfortunately, as we know history, she banked at Ohio Bank. 1922 places us before the Great Depression. Interesting factoid, even as I run out of time, the only bank in Toledo that did not collapse during the Great Depression is that building right there. That building that is now the Riverfront Lofts used to be Toledo Trust. Every bank in this city collapsed. Everyone except for that one. I mean, imagine your life savings being wiped out when the stock market crashed. So unfortunately, Irene didn't bank at Toledo Trust. She banked at Ohio Bank. Her bank collapsed during the Great Depression. The mayor, 100 years in the future, strangely enough, was me. Because her bank collapsed, I never got the $1,005. But it was such a wonderful story that it gave us the idea to honor her spirit and her notion of giving forward, the way Emerson talked about. You can never pay back, but you can always pay forward, and you do it double-fold. That's what Emerson said, and that's what the Irene Guard Award is about. Her spirit lives on, and we have a youth winner every year, and the Young at Heart winner every year. The youth winner of the Irene Guard this year it's a collective effort. It is the students at Elmhurst Elementary. Now here they are. We have, I think, 6 of them with us tonight. We also have some members of their PTA who are here. But the 6 that I believe are with us are Jack Stranker, I hope I pronounced that right, Taylor Gorsuch, Tristan Carter, Kayron Alexander, Riley Robeson, and Landon Miller. I hope I got that right. They're sitting over there somewhere. Well, what did they do? Why did they win the Irene Guard Award? Because they their school is next to a city park called Elmhurst Park. And they noticed that their park needed a little love, needed a little tender loving care, so they entered into what I will describe as the most adorable letter writing campaign in the history of the world, complete with what I will describe as an architectural rendering of exactly the kind of slide and equipment that they wanted. And darn it, we looked at that and said, yeah, we should be we want to reward people who engage in their community this way and know that there's a positive way to make a difference through collective action and advocacy. This is what their playground is going to look like. And for that ingenuity and adorableness, we've decided to give the Youth Irene Guard Award to the students of Elmhurst Elementary School. There's nothing to come up and accept right now, but afterwards we'll take a picture. This hangs in the mayor's office, and there they are right there, Elmhurst Elementary students. We also honor someone who is young at heart. The adult Irene Guard Award winner this year is sitting in the front row, Norma Ramos Prater. Norma works in the Lucas County Prosecutor's Victim Assistance Program. She is their coordinator of Hispanic and Latino outreach. Works especially with domestic violence victims, but really anyone, and will just provide any service they might need. If they need to get to an English class, to get to Jobs and Family Services, legal service, if they need health care, education, whatever it is, Norma will be there. She'll pick them up. She'll drive them to their appointment. She is a one-woman dynamo. She connects them with transportation, language assistance. She works with immigrants. She helps them on their path towards citizenship. That's her picture. The next picture is her. I joined her last week at St. Lucas Lutheran Church in the Old South End, where there's a homeless group that, I think she has an office. Do you have an office up there, Norma, in that building? Maybe not. If you don't, yeah, I just make things up as I go. But she's there, and she is just wonderful. Again, I don't want to get too much into national politics, but I'll just say there's a lot of things are being said about immigrants and refugees in this country right now. And I will simply say that Norma sees the dignity in all of us and the common humanity that we share. We've never talked about it, but it strikes me Norma's the sort of person who has read the Gospel of Matthew and remembers that Jesus Christ himself was an immigrant, was a refugee. The reason he had to hightail it out of Judea and go to Egypt is because King Herod was being a tyrant. And so Jesus was a refugee. And I guess if we kept that in mind, we might be a little more respectful in our debate. Norma is an example of the best of us, and we're going to honor her with the adult Irene Guard Award. As I conclude, and I know I have to conclude because Councilwoman Dr. Jones is holding her stomach in an ominous way, like something's happening in there. There's probably a lot of kicking, and so we don't want any breaking news during the speech. I just got to say, I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish. I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish together. And I don't talk about it a lot, and I guess you kind of have to know me to know this is true. I take The promises I make, I take them seriously. This is my 8th year as mayor. I'm finishing my 2nd term as mayor. I'm reflecting, I've been reflecting back a lot to that first campaign when I first ran in 2017, the things I said, frankly, the promises I made. And it's important to me that we've kept those promises. It's important to me that crime is down in our city 4 consecutive years, year after year after year. It's important to me. I'm proud of the fact that long vacant spaces like the Southwick Mall, Northtown Mall, Jefferson Center, the old Marina project are now life has been breathed into them. I'm proud that we're fixing roads at a clip 15 times greater than we were before I became mayor. I'm proud that we have a rainy day fund 15 times larger than the day I became mayor. I'm proud that we created a regional water system. People forget about that. That was my first year as mayor. You know, we've been fighting over water in this region for 70 years. Oh, you'll never create. We did it. We got the suburbs together and we created a system that's fair for everyone. I promised it, we delivered it. I'm proud that the riverfront is being reimagined. I'm proud that we've invested in our infrastructure, that we made the improvements at the Collins Park water plant, so we no longer have to worry about whether our water is drinkable like we did 10 years ago. I'm proud that we're fixing the Bayview wastewater treatment plant. I'm proud that by next year, not 30 years from now, as originally was the case, but next year, every private lead service line in this city will be replaced. I'm proud that we've offered 300 different free programs every year to 200,000 different kids. I'm proud that in almost half of our parks, in 59 of our city parks, which I think is 47%, about half of our parks, 47% of them, they have seen $25 million of investment and major overhauls and new playgrounds in half of our city parks. I'm proud of that. I'm proud that we're going to upgrade Savage Park this year, and I'm proud that we did what we had to do to get that Wayman Palmer YMCA open this year. There is more that we need to do, and if there were 2 promises I kind of felt like I wasn't doing well on, it's these 2. One was pre-K. I never said that we were going to do it. I kind of put it out there as an aspirational goal, but we still haven't gotten there. We're the only big city in Ohio that does not provide universal pre-K to our 4-year-olds. Hope Toledo is the vessel that can make that happen. Hope Toledo is working with our state legislators right now, our senators and reps, to try to get a provision in the budget this year that would enable them to go to the ballot to pass a levy that they will need to support that work. Not every 4-year-old has access to pre-K yet, but hundreds do. And I guess I say to myself, if even one kid has access to pre-K, if even one 4-year-old has it, that's one more than maybe would have had it had we never raised this issue back in 2017. Hope Toledo is working to put an issue on the ballot, and if we're going to do this, that's, you know, we're going to have to get behind Hope Toledo as it tries to do that. So I'll put an asterisk on that promise. There was one other one, though, that I wasn't doing very well on, I'll be honest. I feel like I really have kept my promises. A little asterisk on pre-K, but there was one that I was not doing well on. Does anyone remember this? This is from 2019. This was the Take It Off Toledo campaign where I, in portlier times, was going to lead the city in a weight loss initiative, and we were going to lose 1 million pounds citywide as a city. Well, this is in 2019. COVID happened a couple weeks after that, and we kind of got distracted. Okay, we did. We got distracted. Obviously, we had other things to focus on, and as I remember, I think most Americans gained 15 pounds during COVID. But it bothered me. It bothered me that that was the one thing that I just didn't do it. And this means so much to me. I said, darn it, I want to keep every promise I made in 2017. So about a year ago, you know, with a lot of time on the bike and some healthier eating choices, I look a little different, I guess, and I suppose one way to put it is there's less of me to vote for now. But we've done a lot. We've done a lot. We've made progress, but there is more that we can do together. And that is why tonight I am formally announcing my candidacy for mayor. I'm going to file my petitions tomorrow. I think we're turning in the maximum allowable under the law to run one final time for 4 more years as your mayor. I'm announcing my candidacy tonight, and I hope that the public entrusts me with this work. Because if the headlines on your chairs are going to come true, if the headlines we've envisioned for 2040 are going to come true, we're going to have to keep making progress. It's time, Toledo. It's time to grow. There's no excuses left. It's time to grow. We can do this work. Let's finish the work we started. Let's finish the work we started 8 years ago. Let's do this together. The biggest step is housing. I've outlined my plans tonight. Now I need to hear from you and your plans. Let's do this together. Let's keep building. God bless you all. God bless the great city of Toledo, Ohio.